إعلان مهم.
重要提示
Important announcement.
Message important.
Важное объявление.
Anuncio importante.
يرجى من المتحدثين الكرام إلقاء بياناتهم بسرعة معقولة لضمان ترجمة فورية وافية وعالية الجودة.
为了帮助口译准确完整传递发言信息，请代表发言时语速不要过快。
Speakers are kindly reminded to deliver their statements at a reasonable pace to ensure complete and quality interpretation.
Il est rappelé aux orateurs qu'ils doivent présenter leur déclaration à un rythme raisonnable afin de garantir une interprétation complète et de qualité.
Напоминаем ораторам, что для обеспечения полного и качественного устного перевода необходимо выступать в умеренном темпе.
Se ruega a los oradores que pronuncien sus declaraciones a un ritmo razonable para garantizar una interpretación íntegra y de calidad.
Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, I call to order the 31st meeting of the 59th session of the Human Rights Council. We will continue with the consideration of draft resolutions and decisions. I have been informed that the resolutions which are ready to be examined during this meeting will be shown on the screen. All the budget program implications are available on the extranet.
Let me remind you again that I will announce the PBIs related to each draft proposal. I will share the costs that have already been budgeted for the relevant years based on perennial or renewable mandates, and I will share the costs where there are additional or new mandates that need to be added to the relevant budgets. PBI figures are an estimate that must go through the normal budget review and approval processes in New York, namely with the ACABQ and the Fifth Committee. Let me emphasize again that in light of the liquidity crisis facing the United Nations as a whole, any approved budget allocation for a mandate does not guarantee the availability of the requested resources. The Council will now consider draft proposal L2 entitled Mandate of Independent Expert on Protection Against Violence and Discrimination Based on Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity. I give the floor to the representatives of Uruguay to introduce the draft text. You have the floor.
Gracias, señor. Thank you, President. On behalf of the core group of Latin American states who have co-sponsored Resolution L2 comprising Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Mexico, and Uruguay, we have the honor of introducing for the adoption by this Council the draft resolution entitled Mandate of Independent Expert on Protection Against Violence and Discrimination Based on Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity. We are convinced of the added value of this mandate, and our group would like to submit for consideration a technical revision, a procedural text which decides to extend the mandate of the independent expert for an additional 3 years in keeping with its original terms of mandate. For now, there are 50 co-sponsors. Over its 9 years of existence, this special procedure, which was created thanks to the joint work of a large number of states and civil society organizations from all regions of the world, this mandate has fostered full respect for the dignity of all persons, providing technical assistance in support of efforts being made by states at the national level to protect human rights. At the same time, this mandate has contributed to preventing and combating violence on grounds of sexual orientation and gender identity, which are scourges that know no borders and pose a challenge to all regions of the world. Our group would like to encourage all states to reaffirm their commitment to combating discrimination and violence against all persons by supporting this draft resolution. With your leave, Mr. President, I would now like to give the floor to the Ambassador of Brazil.
Thank you, Uruguay. Mr. President, we believe this Council must ensure the continued work of the independent expert to protect persons who suffer from violence and discrimination on the basis of their sexual orientation and gender identity. These are specific and serious situations that require dedicated attention and monitoring by the Council. Violence and discrimination are unacceptable under international human rights law. They affront our collective moral conscience. The Council cannot turn a blind eye to violence and discrimination against any vulnerable group. The independent experts holding this mandate have come from Asia, Latin America, and now Africa. They have produced 17 valuable thematic reports and conducted numerous official visits. We must do more to persons in vulnerable situations, not less. We should advance domestic and international protection mechanisms, not dismantle them. We must uphold the principle of leaving no one behind, not neglected. The group of 6 Latin American countries thanks the participation of the civil society, and we hope that the resolution will be adopted by consensus. Thank you.
Thank you. I have been informed by the Secretariat that there are 8 additional co-sponsors. I now give the floor to members of the Council who wish to make general comments. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Spain.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much, President. I have the honor of speaking on behalf of the EU member states that are members of this Council, and this is a general comment which has been agreed upon by the EU as a whole. Every human being is born free and equal in dignity and rights, every one. Yet around the world, individuals continue to face violence, discrimination, harassment and stigmatization because of their sexual orientation and gender identity. Yet in many countries, consenting same-sex relationships are criminalized, with a few still retaining even the death penalty as a legal punishment, a punishment of individuals for simply being who they are and loving whom they love. Despite worrying setbacks in recent years, progress continues. We thank the independent expert for being at the forefront of efforts to combat such violence and discrimination worldwide. President, this resolution does not seek to establish any new rights for individuals or a special protection framework. It is about the equal protection of all individuals against violence and discrimination under existing international human rights law and in line with the principles of the Universal Declaration on Human Rights. We would like to stress once again that sexual orientation and gender identity are among prohibited grounds of discrimination under international human rights law. In line with the Vienna Declaration and Plan of Action, we also recall that cultural, traditional, or religious values cannot be invoked to justify any form of discrimination, including discrimination against LGBTI persons. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Bolivia.
Gracias.
Thank you, President. Bolivia would like to thank the core group for this resolution, Uruguay, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, and Mexico, for their work on this draft resolution, which seeks to extend the mandate of the independent expert on protection against violence and discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. Bolivia is firmly committed to eradicating all forms of discrimination. Our plurinational state is nourished by cultural and ethnic diversity, and we strongly believe that no person should be the target of violence, exclusion, or discrimination on any grounds. Sexual orientation and gender identity should not be grounds for human rights abuses. Therefore, in recent years, we have made significant progress on the legislative front and in terms of public policies. We have developed policies which are aimed at addressing discrimination against LGBTI persons. Our Law 807 and the Act on Gender Identity play a key role in this respect. However, we do acknowledge that there are still major challenges to overcome in order to ensure full and equal protection for persons with diverse sexual orientation and gender identity. We therefore see with concern that at the international level there is an increase in anti-rights movements and the number of manifestations of hate speech and other forms of discrimination. Bolivia therefore supports the renewal of the mandate of the independent expert on sexual orientation and gender identity, because we consider that, like other mandates of this council, it is essential to provide support to states in their efforts to address the challenges that remain in many countries. Having said that, we do also feel it is important to underscore that our country respects different worldviews, and we are not trying to impose things on other states. And in addressing this and other human rights issues, we believe that we have to take into account differences in a constructive way. Only through open dialogue and respect for human rights can we make progress towards ensuring a life free from discrimination for all our people. Bolivia supports this resolution, and we call on member states to adopt it. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Albania.
Thank you, Mr. President. Albania would like to thank all members of the core group for presenting the draft resolution L2 and wishes to express its support for the renewal of mandate of the independent expert on protection against violence and discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. We commend the work of the current mandate holder, Mr. Graham Reed, and his predecessors. Those efforts have been marked by professionalism, inclusivity, and commitment to constructive dialogue. The independent expert plays a key role in addressing violence and discrimination and advancing human rights for all, regardless of sexual orientation and gender identity. This mandate was established in 2016. Since then, it has been renewed twice, each time with growing support from the international community. The independent expert has worked in the spirit of cooperation, offering technical assistance and engaging in meaningful dialogue with state. We are pleased that the independent expert has accepted the invitation of my government and visited Albania in July 2024. We appreciated the constructive meetings that he held with nation and local authorities, civil society, and members of LGBTI community, and we appreciate his useful recommendations. Mr. President, the renewal of this mandate is essential. It provides a platform for dialogue, foster international cooperation, and support states in fulfilling their human rights obligations. It contributes to the achievement of sustainable development goals, particularly those related to equality, justice, and strong institutions. It also sends a clear message that violence and discrimination have no place in our societies. The draft resolution before us has procedural nature. It simply renews the mandate and in its original term without introducing new elements or obligation. Supporting this draft resolution is the reaffirmation of our shared commitment to the universality of human rights. Voting against it or supporting amendments that seek to weaken the mandate would undermine the integrity of the Human Rights Council's special procedure and the protection of those most vulnerable. Albania will vote in favor of the draft resolution and against any proposed amendments that seek to weaken or undermine the mandate. We believe that the continuation of this mandate is essential to advancing human rights for all and fostering inclusive, just, and resilient society. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Switzerland.
Merci, Monsieur. Thank you, President. We commend the approach adopted by the core group of countries of L2, which have succeeded and presented a short and procedural resolution aimed at extending the mandate of the independent expert on protection against violence and discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. As a co-sponsor of this resolution and as a member of the group of friends of the independent expert, we fully support this expert's mandate and its extension. We would like to repeat it once again. Nobody should be subjected to violence or discrimination on grounds of sexual orientation or gender identity. Every person is entitled to dignity and protection. But unfortunately, around the world, we are seeing that LGBTI persons are facing violence and discrimination precisely on grounds of their sexual orientation or gender identity. That is why we believe that the Human Rights Council, the body tasked with the protection and promotion of human rights, has a duty to take up this issue in order to ensure that every individual can enjoy their fundamental rights and freedoms without any exception, regardless of their sexual orientation or gender identity. Therefore, the mandate of the independent expert is highly necessary and more than legitimate. Let us recall the first and second articles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. All human beings are born equal in dignity and rights. This means that discrimination is prohibited and that is clear from many different international treaties. Discrimination is prohibited under international human rights law. That is why we call on all member states to recognize the mandate of the independent expert, to support it, and to contribute to the prevention and protection of the rights of LGBTI persons by committing to this work with the mandate of the independent expert.
The Marshall Islands.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Republic of the Marshall Islands would like to thank the core group for presenting draft resolution on the mandate of the independent expert on protection against violence and discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. Respect, transparency, and dialogue are values that have been guiding Marshall Islands membership of this council, and we extend our gratitude to the core group for approaching negotiations on the same spirit. 77 years ago, members of the United Nations gathered in Paris and affirmed in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that all persons are born free and equal in dignity and rights, without any exception, and as such have the right to protection against all forms of violence and discrimination. It is around this foundational principle of equality for all human beings that the mandate of the independent expert is framed. Mr. President, the Marshall Islands takes this opportunity to renew its commitment to addressing discrimination in all its forms and reaffirms its support for the mandate of the independent expert. We join the core group in urging fellow council members to vote in favor of the resolution. And I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of North Macedonia. North Macedonia didn't ask.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. President, we didn't ask for the
Okay, then I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Cuba.
Muchas gracias, señor Presidente.
Thank you very much, President, and a very good morning. We would like to thank Uruguay, Brazil, Mexico, Colombia, Chile, and Costa Rica for the presentation of draft resolution L2. Cuba reiterates its commitment to human dignity, equality, and non-discrimination in keeping with what is contained in our constitution. In our country, there have been significant steps taken to give legal recognition to and protection for the rights of LGBTIQ+ persons, as reflected in the adoption through a referendum of the new Family Code in September 2022. This legislative step was the result of broad internal consultation and consensus building. 3 years on from the adoption of this code, we are continuing to make headway on its implementation. This includes awareness-raising campaigns, as well as training for legal staff and enhancing our healthcare system. At the same time, we are defending an inclusive, respectful, and non-selective approach to the promotion of human rights, and we recognize the existence of different national circumstances. In this spirit, we support the renewal of the mandate of the independent expert on protection against violence and discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. We see this as an expression of our collective duty to prevent any form of exclusion or stigmatization or violence. And we urge the independent expert to continue contributing to that goal on the basis of dialogue, respect, and cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Spain for a statement in the national capacity.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much, President. Spain fully supports the renewal of the mandate of the independent expert, and we acknowledge the work done by the core group. Since its establishment, this mandate has proven useful in helping states on their compliance with international human rights obligations. Its existence gives hope to those who suffer from exclusion, persecution, and violence on grounds of sexual orientation and gender identity, and also it helps organizations that work for their protection. This is anchored in the fundamental mandate of this council, which is no other than to protect all persons from violence and discrimination. This work is more necessary than ever in an international context in which hate speech and hate crimes that stigmatize and criminalize persons on grounds of their sexual orientation and gender identity are on the rise. Spain reaffirms its commitment to defending and protecting the rights of LGBTI persons, and we bring that commitment to this Council through initiatives such as the Equal Rights Coalition. It is also part of our overall commitment to diversity, which enriches our societies and makes them fairer. That is why Spain hopes this resolution will be adopted by consensus. In doing so, this Council would be sending a clear message of hope that the hope of the Universal Declaration, according to which all persons are equal in dignity and rights, and should also apply to LGBTI persons. And this would mean the Council would be shouldering its responsibility to protect and respect the human rights of all persons without any exceptions. Thank you.
Thank you. I have been informed by the Secretariat that there is a PBI for this proposal. The total amount is of $2,155,800. That's already included in the program budget. And it's for 3 years, so don't worry too much about it. You give the floor to the distinguished representative of Cyprus.
Without discrimination of any kind. Violence and discrimination importance of constructive dialogue in this Council. In dignity and equality. We wish to underline that this resolution constitutes a technical rollover. It does not create a new mandate, but rather renews an existing one consistent with standard practice regarding the extension of special procedures. In this regard, we appreciate the efforts to preserve the mandate as previously defined by the Council. Cyprus will vote in favor of the resolution, renewing the mandate of the independent expert on protection against violence and discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity, and calls other members of the Council to do the same. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Belgium. Belgium has also withdrawn its co-sponsorship of this draft resolution.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, President. Human rights violations on grounds of sexual orientation and gender identity have been regularly brought to the attention of this Council by the High Commissioner and also by the special procedures, including the independent expert. Other treaty bodies of the United Nations, such as CEDAW and the Committee Against Torture, also recognize sexual orientation and gender identity as grounds for discrimination. This Council has a mandate to promote universal respect for all human rights and fundamental freedoms for all, without any discrimination and in a fair and equitable way. Draft Resolution L2, which is strictly procedural and which seeks only to ensure continuity of the work of the independent expert, whose mandate has proven itself to be essential for protecting the rights of a group of people who are regularly discriminated against. The fact is that people around the world continue to face discrimination and violence on grounds of sexual orientation and gender identity. It is essential that the expert can continue to look at best practices and to make constructive recommendations with a view to preventing violence and discrimination and to support states in their efforts to implement their human rights obligations. This is not about creating new rights, but about ensuring the universality and equal enjoyment of existing rights for all. President, for these reasons, Belgium believes that this council has to stay mobilized in the fight against these forms of discrimination, and we fully support the renewal of the mandate. We will vote in favor of the resolution and urge other delegations to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other requests for the floor. At the request of the delegation of Kuwait, the Council will now proceed to a recorded vote on draft proposal L2. I ask the Secretariat to open the voting machine and request the delegations to register their vote. Have all delegations registered their vote? I request delegations to check whether their vote is accurately reflected on the screen. If so, I ask the Secretariat to close the voting machine. The voting is now closed. The result of the recorded votes are as follows: 29 in favor, 15 against, 3 abstentions. Draft proposal L2 is therefore adopted. Copies of the results of the votes will shortly be uploaded on extranet. The Council will now consider draft proposal L6, entitled "The Negative Impacts of Corruption on the Enjoyment of Human Rights." I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Morocco to introduce the draft text.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, sir. It is an honor on behalf of the Kingdom of Morocco and the group of co-sponsors, which are Argentina, Austria, Ecuador, Ethiopia, Indonesia, Poland, and the United Kingdom, to present this draft resolution on the negative impact of corruption on the enjoyment of human rights. Corruption is a rooted threat for the very meaning and sense of our society. By focusing on social services, it undermines social cohesion, erodes trust in public services, and worsens inequalities and creates fertile ground for the most serious human rights violations. As we have reasserted, the International Conference on Funding for Development, Transparency, Accountability, the Rule of Law, Good Governance, and the Fight Against Corruption are vital to realize the Sustainable Development Goals. The Kingdom of Morocco is firmly convinced that an approach based on human rights must be at the very heart of all efforts to combat corruption. Thus, our national experience is based on that approach. The 2011 Constitution of Morocco has ensured that fight against corruption has become a national priority. We have robust mechanisms to prevent and combat corruption. We adopted laws to punish financial crimes and to guarantee citizens access to public information, thereby ensuring that the measures to combat corruption protect and empower all citizens. Our country also supports an approach based on partnership and cooperation between the Human Rights Council and other bodies and institutional frameworks of the United Nations Organization, which are mandated to combat corruption, in particular the UN in Vienna and the process to implement the Convention Against Corruption. This draft resolution, in terms of the innovation provided, is focused on the progress made since the first advisory committee in 2015. It aims to reflect the important theoretical work contained in the report into specific measures. By mandating the committee, this is the advisory committee, to conduct a study once again on the procedural and substantial issues surrounding states to protect human rights when it comes to combating corruption. This draft resolution also aims to promote the key importance of education and training in preventing corruption, as well as the vital role that is played by university parliaments. And we would call upon the members of this council to support the adoption of this council by consensus to convey the message that the fight against corruption cannot be disassociated from promoting and protecting human rights. I thank you, sir.
I have been informed by the Secretariat that there are 25 additional co-sponsors, and I now give the floor to members of the Council who wish to make general comments. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Ethiopia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ethiopia is honored to serve as a core group member of this important initiative and expresses its deep appreciation to all states, observers, international organizations, and civil society stakeholders for their constructive engagement and support throughout the negotiation process. Ethiopia thanks the sponsors of this resolution and welcomes the growing consensus on the critical nexus between corruption and the enjoyment of human rights. Corruption, especially in its systemic and entrenched forms, diverts resources essential for development, undermines good governance, and disproportionately harms those in vulnerable and marginalized situations. We remain deeply concerned by its corrosive impact on public trust, service delivery, and the realization of sustainable development goals, in particular, Goal 16. We reaffirm that the fight against corruption and the promotion and protection of human rights are mutually reinforcing objectives, strengthening the rule of law, ensuring judicial independence, promoting transparency, and granting access to information and meaningful public participation are essential to eradicating corruption and upholding human rights. In fragile institutional contexts or during a crisis such as public health emergencies, and the human cost of corruption becomes even more devastating, undermining the right to health, education, and an adequate standard of living. Ethiopia strongly supports calls for enhanced international cooperation, technical assistance, especially in capacity building, asset recovery, and implementation support for developing countries. We also underscore the vital role of national human rights institutions and anti-corruption authorities in prevention, accountability, and public eradication. We particularly welcome the mandate for a comprehensive study by the Human Rights Council Advisory Committee, which will offer concrete guidance for implementing anti-corruption measures in line with the state's human rights obligations. We call on all stakeholders to support and engage actively in this process and help ensure that the resulting recommendations are practically inclusive and action-oriented. Mr. President, in closing, Ethiopia believes this resolution represents a critical step forward in recognizing and addressing human rights impacts of corruption. We therefore call for its adoption by consensus. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Belgium.
Merci, Monsieur le
Thank you, sir. Belgium would like to thank the countries of the core group for this important initiative and also for their constructive approach during the negotiation of the text. Corruption very seriously compromises the integrity of democratic societies and institutions by eroding rule of law and citizens' trust in the public sector and its representatives. It is a surge that affects many societies and remains a major barrier to the economic development of countries. From that standpoint, the final document of the International Conference on Financing for Development calls upon the international community to support efforts in terms of capacity building and to promote good practices when it comes to combating corruption. Resolution L6 is fully part of the global fight against corruption. Belgium hails represents to strengthening cooperation between the various stakeholders, in particular the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, and support provided to the efforts of the High Commissioner for Human Rights with respect to technical assistance and capacity building. The fight against corruption requires coordinated action from the international community and the United Nations system as a whole. That is why Belgium calls upon members of the Council to support the draft resolution of this text by consensus. I thank you.
The distinguished representative of Ghana.
Thank you, Mr. President. Corruption corrodes the rule of law and regrettably remains a deeply troubling and entrenched challenge. Ghana therefore welcomes this timely and important resolution L6, seeking to address the negative impact of corruption on the enjoyment of human rights. We commend the effort of all the co-sponsors and the core group members. The resolution before us appropriately underscores the intrinsic link between corruption and human rights violations, drawing attention to the imperative for transparency, accountability, and the protection of individuals engaged in anti-corruption efforts. In Ghana, we are leaving no stone unturned. My country remains steadfast in its commitment to combating corruption in all its forms and manifestations. This commitment is enshrined in a 1992 Constitution, particularly under Chapter 5 on fundamental human rights, and is operationalized through key national legislation, including the Office of the Special Prosecutor. At the international level, Ghana is a state party to both the United Nations Convention Against Corruption and the African Union Convention on Preventing and Combating Corruption, recognizing that corruption constitutes a global threat that necessitates collective international response. In this regard, Ghana calls for strengthened international cooperation to tackle the root causes of corruption and to ensure the protection and fulfillment of human rights for all. We therefore encourage all states to reinforce legal and institutional frameworks, guarantee judicial independence, and promote an open civic space in the pursuit of accountability and justice. In closing, my delegation urges the consensual adoption of Resolution L6 to demonstrate our shared commitment to combating corruption and upholding human rights globally. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Cuba.
Thank you very much, President. We would like to thank the delegations of Brazil, Ethiopia, Morocco, Indonesia, Austria, Argentina, Ecuador, Poland, and the United Kingdom for presenting draft resolution L6. We agree that corruption undermines institutions, justice, and endangers social development and the rule of law. It is not possible to aspire to contribute to better societies and countries if effective measures are not adopted to combat corruption. To do this, far-reaching international cooperation is required, spearheaded at the political and technical level by multilateral bodies with a headquarters in Vienna. We also need renewed commitment to the principles and purposes and objectives of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption and its review mechanism. In particular, its intergovernmental nature, which is non-punitive, based on cooperation and exchange of experiences and good practices. That is the legal mechanism and the pertinent framework to address issues related to corruption in all its aspects at the international level. In line with this draft resolution, Cuba defends the design and implementation of policies and tools with a preventive approach based on education, oversight, and accountability to maintain transparency, order, and legality. We would highlight that in these processes, Cuban civil society included academic institutions, students' associations, as well as specialized bodies, make a vital contribution to ensure compliance with the law. Sir, we reject attempts to associate corruption with governments that are not subordinated to interests of domination of the major powers, whilst scandals and transnational scandals involving corporations are announced. The selective purposes used only undermine genuine international cooperation. The best way of tackling the adverse consequences of corruption on human rights is through technical assistance and strengthening capacities within a framework of mutual respect and solidarity. Cuba restates the fact that it's willing to work with all countries to combat corruption and to mitigate its effects. Thus, Cuba supports the adoption by consensus of draft resolution L6. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have been informed by the Secretariat that there are no PBIs for this draft proposal, and I'll give the floor to members of the Council who wish to make explanations of votes before the vote on the draft proposal. I don't see any request for the floor. Is there a request for a vote? I see none. May I take it that draft proposal L6 may be adopted without a vote? It is so decided. Thank you. The Council will now consider draft proposal L8, entitled Access to Medicines, Vaccines and Other Health Products in the context of the right of everyone to the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Brazil to introduce the text.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is our privilege to introduce, on behalf of the core group composed of Bangladesh, China, Egypt, India, Indonesia, Senegal, South Africa, Thailand, and Brazil, the draft resolution entitled Access to Medicines, Vaccines, and Other Health Products in the context of the right of everyone to the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health. This initiative builds upon the Council's long-standing commitment to the right to health. It addresses persistent inequalities in access to essential health technologies, particularly in developing countries and among populations in vulnerable situations. The resolution is presented on a triennial basis, having first been tabled in 2019 and subsequently in 2022, and always adopted without a vote. Mr. President, the core group conducted 2 readings over 4 informal meetings and believes it has succeeded in presenting a consensus text that brings Council members together to galvanize action on access to medicines and vaccines. The text reflects recent developments in global health governance, including the successful adoption of the WHO pandemic agreement. It underscores the imperative of overcoming structural barriers to equitable, timely, and affordable access to medicines, vaccines, and other health products. We have sought to accommodate the concerns of both developed and developing countries. Aware of the challenges posed by limited resources, the core group decided to reduce by half the resource requests initially foreseen in the resolution. The text now requests 1 analytical study and 1 report, ensuring a balanced and realistic approach. In general terms, the draft strengthened countries' commitment to access to medicines and vaccines, to technology transfer, cooperation in health, and addressing social determinants of health. Mr. President, this resolution has consistently received broad support with numerous co-sponsorships and has traditionally been adopted by consensus. We trust that this resolution will once again enjoy the strong support of this Council and be adopted by consensus today. I thank you.
Thank you. I have been informed by the Secretariat that there are 22 additional co-sponsors. And I now give the floor to members of the Council who wish to make general comments. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Mexico.
Thank you, President. Mexico would like to thank Brazil, China, Egypt, India, Indonesia, Senegal, South Africa, and Thailand for presenting draft resolution L8 on access to medicines, vaccines, and other health products in the context of the right of everyone to the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health. We welcome the fact that this resolution seeks to guarantee equitable access, timely and unhindered access to medicines, vaccines, diagnoses, and safe health technologies as a key element for the full enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health, particularly for the most vulnerable populations. We reaffirm the responsibility of states and promote international cooperation, innovation, in order to overcome current barriers and to move towards universal health coverage. In addition, we commend also the fact that the L8 is in line with what is agreed upon in the WTO agreement on pandemics, maintaining the terms agreed upon through very hard negotiations without introducing interpretations which compromise the spirit, commitment and collaboration between countries, which are firmly rooted in the principle of equity. Lastly, we reassert our commitment to the gradual realization of social, economic and cultural rights, and we believe that international cooperation to be vital to attain equity in terms of health. That is why our country supports draft resolution L8 and calls for its adoption by consensus, and we restate our commitment to promoting a human rights-based approach in this area. I thank you very much, sir.
You'll give the floor to the distinguished representative of Cuba.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, sir. We would like to thank Algeria, Bangladesh, Brazil, China, Egypt, India, Indonesia, Samoa, Senegal, South Africa, and Thailand for submitting draft resolution L8, which is a significant input and timely contribution to promoting the right of all persons to the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health. It addresses in depth the structural dimensions of inequalities in access to health technologies, vital essential services, and health medicines. L8 summarizes the message that health cannot be a privilege or merchandise, but it must be a universal health right. The initiative explicitly recognizes the challenges that developing countries face to guarantee the right to health, in particular within a global context marked by deep inequalities. Cuba agrees with the stress placed in the text on the need to do away with barriers that limit access to essential health products, including the restrictive provisions of intellectual property, which prioritize profit over human lives. At the same time, we underscore the recognition of draft resolution to incompatible actions with the United Nations Charter and other conventions which violate the lives of millions of people. Precisely, Cuba on a daily basis suffers the economic, financial and commercial blockade imposed by the United States of America, which leads to significant impact on access to health, technologies, medicines, and specialized services. For Cuba, strengthening the productive local capacities and transfer of technology are pillars that cannot be substituted to guarantee health coverage. That is why we welcome the fact that the draft resolution L8 highlights the importance of regional and local production, as well as alliances to create and foster capacity building. We reassert our belief that health must be dealt with as a global public good and not as a merchandise, which is subject to economic and trade interests. We are pleased that the draft resolution precisely is focused on that objective. That is why Cuba supports draft resolution L8 and urges members of the Council to back its adoption. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll give the floor to the distinguished representative of Bangladesh.
Mr. President, in the backdrop of the historical adoption of the WHO pandemic agreement, and as a member state who has played an important and constructive role during the negotiation of the agreement, Bangladesh is honored to join the core group of this important resolution on access to medicines, vaccines, and other health products in the context of the right to health. We commend all delegations for their constructive engagements and the spirit of cooperation that has guided us throughout the negotiations. Mr. President, this resolution comes at a critical juncture. The COVID-19 pandemic has exposed and exacerbated structural inequities in access to life-saving medicine, vaccines, diagnostics, and health products. In this regard, we highlight the significant new elements incorporated in this resolution, which reflect the lessons learned and address the evolving challenges. Notably, the resolution welcomes the adoption of the WHO pandemic agreement and its provisions for research and development, sustainable and geographically diversified local production, technology transfer, and a pathogen access and benefit sharing system. These elements are vital for building resilience and ensuring that no one is left behind in future health emergencies. We also appreciate the recognition of the newly established Coalition for Local and Regional Production, Innovation and Equitable Access, which centers on voluntary cooperation to promote access for persons in vulnerable situations and neglected diseases. This is particularly relevant for countries like Bangladesh, where local production capacity can significantly enhance national and regional health security. We further note the renewed emphasis on strengthening the health and care workforce, particularly the primary health care workforce and the employment of women at all levels. This complements our national efforts to build a resilient, community-driven health system. Moreover, this resolution underscores the importance of innovative funding mechanisms such as Health Technology Access Program and encourages exploration of a potential global end-to-end platform for equitable distribution of health products. Finally, we appreciate the enhanced role envisioned for the OHCHR in providing technical assistance and conducting in-depth analysis of protection gaps with a view to ensuring accessibility for vulnerable groups, including least developed and small island developing countries. To conclude, it is our firm conviction that all of us, whether from global north or global south, are equally committed to advancing the right of everyone to the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health. To that extent, we believe that this resolution, like its previous iterations, will continue to enjoy the consensus of the Council. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Colombia.
Señor Presidente, President, Colombia would like to thank the core group for presenting this draft resolution and has decided to co-sponsor it because of the importance that policies have on access to medicines, vaccines, and other health products. In the context of the right of everyone to the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health, we welcome the fact that the resolution recognizes the latest legal developments in terms of access, and therefore it makes explicit reference to the regulations, health regulations, and the WHO agreement on pandemics. One of the components underscored in the resolution is the important role played by the transfer of technology and knowledge in guaranteeing equitable access to vaccines, medicines, and other health products, in particular in developing countries. Colombia acknowledges the promotion of transfer of technology in mutually agreed terms between providers of technology and the receivers. But this should not in any way limit the political and regulatory power of the state to promote other modalities of transfer of technology, in step with the flexibility of the TRIPS agreement to acknowledge and ensure that all persons have the right to enjoy the highest attainable standard of health. We regret the fact that in the context of this resolution, language has not been included on access to medicine where oversight is required, in particular palliative products and pain control. In the report of the High Commissioner and that of the Special Rapporteur on the right of all persons to the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health, repeatedly stress has been placed on the profound inequalities on access to these medicines, which are vital to guarantee rights such as health and dignity. That is why we are surprised to note that this wasn't an issue that wasn't considered as part of this resolution. Therefore, we would call upon the Council so that for future opportunities, we include and substantively discuss this issue from a human rights-based approach, and with empathy with the 89% of the global population which do not have access to those medicines and suffers unnecessarily. We very much hope that we will make headway jointly to include approaches based on action to guarantee equitable access of these types of medicines. This does not mean that Colombia would not join consensus, and therefore we call upon other states to do so. Thank you very much, sir.
I will give the floor to the distinguished representative of Ethiopia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ethiopia extends its sincere thanks to the core group members for their leadership and inclusive approach in facilitating this text. Ethiopia aligns itself with the firm recognition that access to medicines, vaccines, diagnostics, and health technologies is not a privilege, but a fundamental element of the right to health. This is particularly vital in a world still grappling with the far-reaching consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic and other health emergencies. We are encouraged by the resolution's holistic frame of the right to health, which rightly emphasizes universal health coverage, equity in access, and special attention to the needs of persons in vulnerable situations, including women, children, older persons, persons with disabilities, and those living in poverty. Ethiopia also welcomes the reference to key international instruments, including the WHO Pandemic Agreement, the WIPO Treaty on Genetic Resources and Traditional Knowledge, and the revised international health regulations. These are timely developments that, if implemented in good faith, can significantly enhance the world's preparedness, prevention, and response to future health threats based on principles of solidarity, equity, and human rights. In this regard, we reiterate the importance of local and regional production of medicines and vaccines, technology transfer, and voluntary cooperation as pathways to health sovereignty and resilience in the global south. The continued marginalization of developing countries in global supply chains must be addressed urgently and structurally. Ethiopia also fully supports the call for the Office of the High Commissioner to enhance its work on this subject, including through capacity building, technical assistance, and the development of a study to identify protection gaps affecting vulnerable populations in accessing essential health products. Finally, Mr. President, we echo the resolution's message that timely, equitable, and unhindered access to safe, affordable, and effective health products is indispensable to achieving the right to health. We join others in calling for the consensus adoption of this resolution and reaffirm our commitment to advancing health equity, global solidarity, and the well-being of present and future generations. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Thailand.
Mr. President, Thailand wishes to thank Brazil as the pen holder and other members of the core group for presenting this draft resolution. As a member of the core group, Thailand attaches great importance to the right of everyone to the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health. In light of the current health challenges, especially those disproportionately affecting vulnerable populations, Thailand views this resolution as a timely and meaningful step towards the realization of this right. Ensuring access to medicines, vaccines, and other health products is essential to promoting health equity across the globe. Moreover, this resolution is in line with Thailand's long-standing commitment to health for all, especially with our Universal Health Coverage, UHC, launched in 2002. In our experience, UHC schemes can be used to ensure affordability and accessibility, significantly reducing out-of-pocket expenses and improving health outcomes, particularly for those in need, resulting in higher health equity. Thailand also believes the key to success for our collective work is not to move in a silo, but to keep in mind other parallel processes such as the pandemic agreement and the soon-to-begin negotiation of the open-ended intergovernmental working group for the annex of the agreement. In this regard, Thailand seeks everyone's support on this important resolution. We encourage all countries to strengthen cooperation and solidarity in promoting timely and equitable access to medicines, vaccines, and other essential health products to ensure the well-being of all people and leaving no one behind. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Sudan.
شكرا. شكرا السيد الرئيس.
Thank you.
Lydia.
Importante de la realización de este derecho.
Good multidimensional crises, and it has had an impact on and persons in
Los pueblos indígenas, campesinos, campesinas.
health products. It is a fundamental right for the commercialized. Therefore, we believe that states need to cooperate as well as the international community in order to local production on the basis of the promotion medicine in strengthening prevention
Gracias.
Thank you.
L'Égypte, de l'Inde, de l'Indonésie et du Sénégal. Pour avoir présenté le projet de résolution L8.
Draft resolution L8 and for having engaged in a transparent and inclusive consultation process. Algeria is delighted to co-sponsor this key initiative. This draft resolution is of particular significance following the adoption of the Pandemic Treaty, which sets out an international framework focused on equitable access to medicine, vaccines, and other health products, placing equity at the heart of prevention and responses to future pandemics. According to the WHO, nearly 2 billion people have still not got access to basic medicines, and 1 million people, including persons with disabilities or older persons, cannot access assistive technologies. 45% of the global population is living in countries where access to some medicines is limited or non-existent. As the High Commissioner underscored in his report during the 59th session, if medical innovations based on patents has without a doubt improved the health of millions, it has also shown its limit when it comes to ensuring equitable access to health products. We would like to echo his appeal. States must ensure that intellectual property rights are not invoked or applied in a way that is incompatible with the fundamental right to access medicines, vaccines, and other health products. Draft Resolution L8 is a sincere and tangible reflection of what should be a human rights-based approach in the field of healthcare. We hope very much that the Council will adopt it by consensus. If that were not to be the case, Algeria would vote in favor of this resolution, and we call on all member states to do the same. Thank you.
I have been informed by the Secretariat that in spite of the restraint by the co-authors that was explained by Brazil, there is still the PBI for this draft proposal. The PBI amounts to a total of $289,900. This will need to be added to the budget. I now give the floor to members of the Council who wish to make explanations of votes before the vote on the draft proposal. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Czechia.
Mr. President, let me begin by reaffirming our strong commitment to the right of everyone to the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health. We recognize the importance of equitable access to medicines, vaccines, and other health products, particularly for those in vulnerable situations. This is a core human rights concern, a priority for our delegation. Despite repeated efforts to engage constructively, our views and proposals have not been adequately reflected in the text. We would like to share these concerns with the resolution. The resolution extends beyond the Human Rights Council's mandate, delving into international trade or intellectual property files that are more appropriately addressed in other fora. It also duplicates ongoing processes on public health or development. In times of austerity measures, the resolution assigns a major tasks to the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, including an analytical study and a comprehensive report via global consultations. The resolution lacks a clear human rights-based approach to access to medicines. It does not sufficiently address accountability, participation, or remedies for rights violations, which are essential components of the right to health. The language implicitly referring to unilateral coercive measures is not directly relevant to the human rights dimension of access to health products and risk politicizing the resolution. In the light of these concerns, we call for a vote on L8. We believe that consensus should not come at the expense of meaningful participation and genuine negotiations. A vote is not a rejection of the resolution's objectives, but a call for greater transparency, inclusivity, cooperation, and balance in how these resolutions are developed. We remain committed to constructively engage and hope in more inclusive and balanced negotiations in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of South Africa, and I would like to inform the Council that South Africa has withdrawn its co-sponsorship of this draft resolution as reflected in e-delegate and can therefore intervene on this resolution. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. South Africa takes the floor in support of Resolution L8. The provisions of this resolution are embedded in the theme of our G20 presidency, namely solidarity, equality, and sustainability. The resolution is especially timely as it comes on the heels of the adoption of the pandemic agreement, whose annex should provide an international framework for equitable access to medicines, vaccines, and other health products in order to prevent, prepare for, and respond to future pandemics. This is critical if we are to address the structural inequalities exposed by the COVID-19 pandemic, which disproportionately affect developing countries, more especially on the African continent. Access to medicines, vaccines, and other health products is an essential component of the right of everyone to the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health as enshrined in international norms and standards. Yet, 2 billion people globally have no access to essential medicines, while inequities in access are prevalent within and between countries, disproportionately affecting the poor and vulnerable populations. Accordingly, while South Africa acknowledges that medical innovation rooted in the patent system contributes to improving the health and lives of millions, the fact remains that the very same system has also hampered equitable access. As the report of the High Commissioner to this session states, states should refrain from invoking intellectual property rights in a manner inconsistent with effective access in other countries in line with their international obligations under the right to health. This includes the application of the flexibilities set out in the TRIPS agreement. In so doing, states should instead pursue a human rights-based approach that recognizes essential medicines, vaccines, and other health products as global public goods. It is this noble spirit that underpins Resolution 8, Resolution L8, and as such, South Africa calls on members of the Council to vote in favor of L8 to advance the realization of the right to health for all. We owe this as a tribute to the proud memory of the countless victims of the COVID-19 pandemic. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Spain.
Thank you, President. I am speaking on behalf of the EU member states that are members of the Human Rights Council. This explanation of vote has been agreed upon by the EU as a whole. We thank the
de 8, lamentamos que las negociaciones hayan ignorado nuestras principales preocupaciones. Una de ellas es el riesgo
of our key concerns were ignored during the negotiations. One of them related to discussions of experts.
Lo anterior se aplica mutatis mutandis a los recursos. Para futuras sesiones estamos
Give the floor to the distinguished representative of Colombia. Colombia has
sucedió hace 3 años. Más lamentable. Por ello, Colombia deplora hacia esquemas de transferencia netamente voluntarios. Llamamos Sin embargo, esto de ninguna forma zanjadas en escenarios relevantes para los temas de salud.
The right for all persons to enjoy
Indonesia. Indonesia has also withdrawn its co-sponsorship of this draft resolution. Please.
Mr. President, let me take us back to the time of COVID-19 pandemic, which exposed harsh realities. Countless lives lost, fragmented responses, and deep inequities where vaccines were sold to the highest bidder. Survival in a pandemic cannot be the privilege of a few. It must be a right that everyone is entitled to. We therefore welcome the historic adoptions of the pandemic agreement, which lays the foundations for a safer and more equitable world. We also look forward to the timely conclusions of member states-led negotiations on its annex on pathogen access and benefit sharing. PAP systems offers a sure way to securing rapid and fair access to vaccines, treatments, and diagnostic for developing countries during a pandemic. This reflects a transition from charity into a solution that empowers developing countries. They also need meaningful support to build local production capacities and invest in research and development, enabling them to meet the surging demands for life-saving tools in health emergencies. Technology transfers is a critical part to achieving this goal. We cannot accept limiting technology transfer to a purely voluntary approach, which constrains countries' options to facilitate technology transfer under their national laws. We cannot repeat this mistake. Mr. President, draft resolution L8 stands as an expression of solidarity with developing countries and persons in vulnerable situations to address the barriers they face in accessing medicines, vaccines, and other health products, which are essential to realizing the right to health. The text also reiterates the call upon the international community to continue assisting developing countries in this regard, including through financial and technical support, capacity building, and transfer of technologies. We deeply regret that this draft resolution is now facing an attempt of rejections. Finally, we urge all members of the Council to demonstrate unity, solidarity, and commitment on this cause by supporting draft resolution L8 and vote in favor. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Iceland.
Thank you, Mr. President. Iceland thanks the core group for presenting draft resolution L8. Iceland recognizes the right of everyone to the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health. Further, we note that the Constitution of the World Health Organization also recognizes the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of health as a fundamental right of every human being without distinction of race, religion, political belief, economic or social condition. Access to medicines, vaccines, and other health products is crucial for preventing and treating diseases. Ensuring access for everyone, regardless of their socioeconomic status, geographic location, or other factors, is vital for upholding human dignity and equality. Iceland is strongly committed to this goal. Regarding draft resolution L8, we remain concerned about references to the pandemic agreement, which do not fully reflect the carefully negotiated language used and agreed at WHO and the World Health Assembly. For these reasons, Iceland will abstain on L8. I thank you.
Thank you. I don't see other requests for the floor. At the request of the delegation of Czechia, the Council will now proceed to a recorded vote on draft proposal L8. I ask the Secretariat to open the voting machine and request delegations to register their vote. Have all delegations registered their vote? I request delegations to check whether their vote is accurately reflected on the screen. If so, I ask the Secretariat to close the voting machine. The voting is now closed. The result of the recorded vote is as follows: 32 in favor, none against, 15 abstentions. Draft proposal L8 is therefore adopted. Copies of the results of the votes will shortly be uploaded on extranet. The Council will now consider draft proposal L9, entitled Human Rights and International Solidarity. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Cuba to introduce the draft text.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, President. The delegation of Cuba, on behalf of the 29 co-sponsor states, has the honor of introducing draft resolution L9 entitled Human Rights and International Solidarity. In a context in which conflicts are worsening and international peace and stability are at risk, and the UN Charter and international law are being violated, and there are setbacks regarding the achievement of the SDGs, and the full enjoyment of fundamental human rights is hindered and inequalities are widening, it is more urgent than ever before to promote international solidarity. Long gone are the times when egoism prevailed. There must be human rights which are a response for us to address the problems that affect human beings in general. Several mandate holders of this mandate have been working in recent years on a right to international solidarity. We are aware of the challenges linked to the negotiations here, and this draft resolution proposes for consultations being held within a year. Its main goal is to promote transparency, inclusiveness, and collective reflection. Because of the complex financial situation affecting the United Nations, our delegation has proposed flexible and cost-saving formats which seek to achieve the negotiations for the lowest possible cost. We'd like to thank all civil society organizations and NGOs who, in a constructive way, have contributed to this text. We also thank the independent expert and the Office of the High Commissioner for their relevant recommendations. President, true to our historic stance, this initiative, instead of looking at a punitive and interfering or confrontational approach, focuses on promoting dialogue, cooperation and solidarity on human rights. It recognizes the contribution made by universal human rights mechanisms, in particular the UPR. For a long time now, the arguments of those who oppose this draft resolution have not been holding water. They use rhetorical mechanisms to question its relevance, and it is those same states who promote hostility and confrontation. There are eloquent solutions which show that international solidarity and cooperation are the most effective way for addressing international human rights challenges and contributing towards the full realization of human rights. Our world needs more solidarity and less rhetorics. Our people have the right to give and receive solidarity. Therefore, Cuba, on behalf of the co-sponsor states, would like to ask the member states of this council to vote in favor of draft resolution L9. Thank you.
Thank you. I have been informed by the Secretariat that there are 16 additional co-sponsors. I now give the floor to members of the Council who wish to make general comments. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Ethiopia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ethiopia is pleased to be a sponsor of this important resolution and would like to extend sincere appreciation to Cuba for its leadership in tabling and guiding this initiative. We reaffirm our strong belief that international solidarity is not only a moral imperative, but a legal and practical necessity, especially in a world facing overlapping and deeply interconnected challenges. The resolution under consideration speaks to the urgent need for collective, coordinated, and rights-based responses to global issues, ranging from pandemics and climate change to poverty and structural inequality. For Ethiopia, the principles of mutual respect, cooperation, and equitable partnerships are essential foundations for a fair international order. The resolution's reaffirmation of these principles rooted in the Charter of the United Nations and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is timely and welcome. We particularly value the text's recognition that international solidarity must go beyond aid and charity. It must involve sharing knowledge, resources, and responsibilities to address systemic gaps that impede the realization of economic, social, and cultural rights, including the right to development. Ethiopia supports the resolution's call to strengthen technical cooperation, capacity building, and South-South and triangular cooperation tools that are increasingly critical for developing countries to address their human rights challenges in ways that are context appropriate and locally driven. We also underscore the imperative of the work of the independent experts on international solidarity and support the continuation of the initiative, the continuation of inclusive consultations toward the development of a revised draft declaration on the right to international solidarity. Ethiopia looks forward to engaging constructively in this process and encourages others
confront complex global challenges in isolation. poverty, raising inequalities, climate crisis, and reminded us that the collective problems require collective responses rooted in mobilizing new and additional resources to support the we commend the recognition that international solidarity commitment to sharing best practices and fostering regional continued work of the independent expert to advance international
Mr. President, Algeria
جماعية تقع على عاتق جميع الدول دون استثناء.
All countries, particularly those which are rich and have more capabilities, these countries should shoulder their responsibilities in supporting developed and least developed countries by sharing burdens in order to achieve sustainable development and allow all people to enjoy peace, dignity, and prosperity. International solidarity on this basis enshrines the principles of equity, justice, and shapes a more balanced world. We stress that international solidarity is not limited to assistance or help, but is more comprehensive, which involves sustainability of international relations, particularly coexistence between countries and partnerships and just divisions of benefits and burdens. Given that we believe that independence in Africa and security are related to sustainable development, Algeria has renewed its pledge through its participation in 4th International Conference on Investment of Development in Sevilla, in Spain last week. We stressed our pledge to invest development programs in African countries through Algerian International Development Agency for Solidarity and Development. We dedicated no less than $1 billion. The adoption of L9 on the basis of consensus sends a potent message with supporting millions around the world who are facing difficult challenges that require a collective response. The L9 is, if tabled for vote, will vote in favor of it.
$1,100. This amount and will need to be added to the budget. I now give the floor to members of the Council who wish to make explanations of votes before the vote on the draft proposal. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Japan.
Thank you, Mr. President. We thank Cuba for preparing the draft resolution L9. Japan fully recognizes the importance of international solidarity from a political and moral perspective. However, we have concerns regarding the definition of international solidarity as referenced in the present resolution, as it lacks clarity and cannot be regarded as established under international law. Furthermore, it must be duly emphasized that the primary holders of human rights are individuals, and that the primary responsibility for the promotion and protection of human rights lies with each member state. In the same vein, the issues addressed in this resolution fall outside the scope of the Council's mandate, and therefore we cannot support it. For these reasons, we call for a vote and we vote against this resolution. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Mexico.
Muchas gracias, señor.
Thank you very much, President. We would like to thank Cuba for presenting draft resolution L9, Human Rights and International Solidarity. As flagged in the text, international solidarity is not just focused on assistance or humanitarian aid, but encompasses a broader concept, including sustainability and international relations, in particular economic, fair relations and peaceful coexistence among states. Mexico shares the belief that international solidarity and cooperation are powerful governments and peoples to tackle global challenges.
Representative of Spain.
Cuba, la transparencia del proceso de negociación. La solidaridad internacional está en el centro.
Is at the very core of the EU's foreign action. The Union and its member states for a long time have been at the forefront of supporting global efforts to promote sustainable development. Together, we account today for 42% of all official development aid, ODA, thereby maintaining an stable indicator compared to the previous year. The EU is present and provides cooperation and development in all regions and all sectors, and its aim is to provide collectively at least 0.7% of the GDP as ODA for 2030. The aim is to expedite the implementation of the SDGs. The EU is in favor of improving the international cooperation architecture for development, benefiting from the strengths and experience of relevant bodies, and guaranteeing that this is appropriate to step up financing for sustainable development. We underscore the importance of having environments that are conducive to fostering financing for sustainable development, and the importance of leadership and commitment of stakeholders and national authorities who bear the primary responsibility for development in their own countries. Coming back to the resolution in question, we appreciate the openness and inclusion of the EU's proposal to convene part of the consultations of the independent expert in a hybrid format, which we believe to be an important response to the Council's financial situation. Nonetheless, the EU's position on this draft resolution continues to be the same as in previous years. We restate that the concept of the right to international solidarity lacks a basis in international law, and that issues addressed in this draft are outside of the Human Rights Council's mandate. That is why the EU cannot support Resolution L9. Its aim is to ensure that international solidarity is a foundational principle of international law and international human rights law. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll give the floor to the distinguished representative of South Africa.
Thank you, Mr. President. South Africa wishes to express its appreciation to Cuba for tabling Resolution L9 on human rights and international solidarity for adoption by this Council. This resolution resonates with the theme of South Africa's G20 presidency, namely solidarity, equality, and sustainability. The resolution is all the more relevant in the current geopolitical situation, when nationalism and protectionism are posing a threat to multilateralism, international cooperation, and solidarity. Mr. President, international solidarity can be a powerful tool for addressing the structural causes of extreme poverty, food insecurity, climate change, health pandemics, inequality, migration, and other global challenges confronting humanity. The gap between developed and developing countries is not only glaring, but it is widening. We believe that it is through sustained and concerted efforts of international cooperation and solidarity that we can address global inequality. For many developing countries, the realization of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development remains a distant dream, just 5 years before the deadline of 2030. The international community must remain committed to this ambitious agenda to end poverty and hunger, to protect the planet, to achieve gender equality, universal education and health coverage, and to promote decent work and sustainable economic growth. In line with the spirit of the Seville FFD Declaration, we call on developed countries to implement fully their official development assistance commitments, including the commitment to achieve the target of 0.7% of gross national income for official development assistance. We maintain that international solidarity must not be limited to international assistance and cooperation, aid, charity, or humanitarian assistance. It must be seen in a broader context, in a broader concept and principle that includes sustainability in international relations. Indeed, international solidarity and cooperation is a duty for states, and that it should be implemented without any conditionality and on the basis of mutual respect. South Africa will vote in favor of L9 and calls on members of this Council to also vote in favor of L9 as a demonstration of the Council's commitment to a just and equitable world in which all enjoy human rights. I thank you.
Thank you. I'll give the floor to the distinguished representative of Chile.
Thank you very much, President. I will refer to the resolution called Human Rights and International Solidarity, and we would like to thank Cuba for its submission. As has been explained previously before this Council, Chile appreciates the importance of international solidarity, and this topic has historically been an important component of our foreign policy. However, our country has voiced its apprehensions about the appropriateness of moving forward on a declaration on human rights and international solidarity, as well as the very makeup of solidarity as a right. We are not quite convinced that this has legal foundations. Our concerns persist around this resolution. This initiative insists on configuring solidarity as a right as a right and contains references to peoples instead of individuals, which in our country's opinion waters down human rights. At the same time, the decision to continue to advance on the Special Rapporteur's decision on this topic is particularly complex given the lack of current liquidity, which means that other initiatives are more demanding and enjoy consensus. As stated, this vote in abstention should not be interpreted as a rejection of the very idea of international solidarity. On the contrary, we appreciate the importance of international solidarity and cooperation, and we are aware of the importance that this can have for the purposes of moving forward on implementing the 2030 agenda and ensuring that not leaving anyone behind becomes effective. As explained, this vote in abstention is based on our doubts and those of other countries as to whether solidarity is a right and the lack of approach on individuals as human rights holders. This is an area which requires greater discussion within this Council and must can take on all views before deciding to advance on a declaration in the terms outlined. We are open to constructive dialogue with Cuba and other co-sponsors of this resolution so that we can make headway in this respect. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Bolivia, and I inform the Council that Bolivia has withdrawn its co-sponsorship of this draft resolution as reflected in e-delegate and can therefore intervene at this point of the debate.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you, sir. Bolivia would like to thank the distinguished delegation of Cuba for its work on draft resolution on human rights and international solidarity. Bolivia supports this draft resolution. International solidarity is part of our foreign policy, and we want to recall that solidarity has been defined in the work of the United Nations since the establishment of our organization. Humanity of the planet, the Mother Earth, through multiple global challenges that have been highlighted in energy, financial, food crises, climate crises, and these can only be tackled through international solidarity and cooperation. These problems affect all of us and must have global responses that are agreed upon and coordinated. Thus, we believe that there is a need to strengthen international solidarity, to strengthen multilateralism, and to promote relations on an equal footing and the equitable distribution of responsibilities and benefits. We also underscore the importance of international solidarity as a founding principle of our organization. In addition, we highlight the importance of this to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and to achieve substantive progress when it comes to human rights, including the right to development. In the face of growing anti-rights discourse across the world, Bolivia appreciates the approach of this resolution, which promotes dialogue, cooperation, and the promotion of fairer and more equitable societies. So the world needs fewer clashes and confrontations and greater cooperation and solidarity. That is why Bolivia will vote in favor of this resolution and would respectfully ask members of this Council to support it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't see any other requests for the floor. At the request of the delegation of Japan, the Council will now proceed to a recorded vote on draft proposal L9. I ask the Secretariat to open the voting machine and request all delegations to register their vote. Have all delegations registered their vote? I request delegations to check whether their vote is accurately reflected on the screen, and if so, I ask the Secretariat to close the voting machine. The voting is now closed. The results of the recorded votes are as follows: 27 in favor, 16 against, 4 abstentions. Draft proposal L9 is therefore adopted. Copies of the results of the votes will shortly be uploaded on extranet. The Council will now consider draft proposal L11, entitled The Right to Education. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Portugal to introduce the draft text.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the honor to introduce draft resolution L11 entitled The Right to Education. Portugal wishes to thank all delegations for their constructive engagement during the 4 rounds of open informal consultations and all 62 cross-regional co-sponsors so far for their support. We extend our thanks to the Special Rapporteur on the Right to Education, OHCHR, UNESCO and civil society. Mr. President, with only 4 years to go until 2030, the implementation of ODS 4 is one of the most delayed. This is hampering the implementation of the remaining ones, considering the transformative effect of education across societies. Lack of investment and inequalities are responsible for preventing millions of people from accessing education. This draft resolution urges all states to comply with their obligation to realize the right to education without discrimination, including by making education a priority in their national budgets. It calls upon states to ensure accessible, inclusive and equitable quality education at all levels and to promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. This initiative builds from the extensive work of the Special Rapporteur, namely her recommendations on the right to be safe in education, the right to academic freedom, the positive impacts and risks of artificial intelligence in education, and on the role and rights of teachers. You are particularly concerned about the increasing restrictions imposed on academic freedom, both on staff and students. Academic freedom is at the heart of scientific progress and free thinking. Since the last presented this resolution, the increasing armed conflict around the world has left millions of children out of school. The international community cannot be indifferent to the long-lasting effects of the scourge of war in generations to come. As such, this draft resolution strongly condemns recurring and increasing attacks on education in the context of armed conflict and situations of occupation, as well as the military use of education facilities. It notes the efforts of the signatories of the Safe Schools Declaration in this regard and makes a strong call for accountability. Mr. President, Portugal hereby submits L11 to the consideration of this Council. It is our hope that it can be adopted again by consensus and with the widest possible support. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you. I have been informed by the Secretariat that there are 25 additional co-sponsors, and I give the floor to members of the Council who wish to make general comments. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Cuba.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, President. We would like to thank the delegation of Portugal for presenting draft resolution L11. Cuba restates its firm, unwavering commitment to the promotion and protection of the human right to free of charge, universal quality education without discrimination of any type. In our country, education is not a privilege, but rather it constitutes an essential pillar of the social project and a right which has been guaranteed since early childhood until the highest levels of education, including university and postgraduate education. This model has been made possible thanks to sustained political will and constant investment in human beings. We believe that, and we affirm and appreciate that the resolution wishes to do away with the structural and social barriers which affects millions of people, particularly women, girls, persons with disabilities, and people living in rural areas from fully exercising this right. It is particularly relevant to recognize the additional challenges that developing countries face to comply with this obligation within a context marked by economic crises and growing inequalities, and when it comes to Cuba, by the negative impact of unilateral coercive measures which hamper access to material resources and technologies. We restate the appeal of the resolution L11 to increase public financing for education, including in emergency contexts. We support its condemnation of the merchandising of knowledge, and we firmly support the need to regulate the participation of the private sector to ensure that education continues to be a public good. President, We highlight the need to guarantee education which is not only accessible, but also inclusive, relevant, and transformative. It must promote values of solidarity, peace, social justice, and respect for cultural diversity. Cuba will continue to defend the fact that education must be an emancipating and social transformative tool, and reasserts its commitment to the full implementation of the right to health as part of its humanist, supportive, and international-based approach. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of South Africa.
Thank you for giving me the floor, Mr. President. South Africa takes the floor in support of Resolution L9 and wishes to thank Portugal for championing this important initiative. We also express our appreciation to Portugal for taking on board our proposals, which were echoed by many delegations during the informal consultations on the resolution. Indeed, the right to education has taken pride of place in our efforts to build a new nation out of the ashes of the old. We owe this imperative not only to future generations, but also to the proud memory of those who came before us. This is reflected in South Africa's Freedom Charter adopted in 1955, whose 70th anniversary was celebrated on 26 June, which served as the blueprint for the future non-racial, non-sexist, and democratic society that we're fighting to establish, which was the very antithesis of apartheid. In so doing, the Freedom Charter declared that the doors of learning and culture shall be opened to all, and that education shall be free, compulsory, universal, and equal for all children. Accordingly, today, this vision is enshrined in our democratic constitution, which provides for the right to education. As South Africans, what we want for ourselves, we want for others, yet the realization of the right to education sadly remains a distant dream for millions of children across the globe. This was starkly brought to the fore this session in the findings of the Independent Commission of Inquiry on the Occupied Palestinian Territory, which demonstrated how Israel's genocidal onslaught on the Palestinians has completely obliterated Gaza's education system, metastasizing to the West Bank, including East Jerusalem. Accordingly, while safety in educational settings is a fundamental precondition for realizing the right to education, schools in the OPT and indeed in other situations of foreign occupation, which should serve as sanctuaries for children's learning and growth, have instead become sites of fear and destruction. The Vienna Declaration and Program of Action, which is an agenda item of this Council, makes explicit reference to the term foreign occupation and its nexus with the violation of the inalienable right to self-determination of all peoples. This is the very wellspring from which the realization of all human rights and fundamental freedoms flow, including the right to education, and as such should presumably be reflected in the Council's resolution in this regard. It is therefore in this regard, Mr. President, that we call on members of this Council to adopt L9 by consensus. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Brazil.
Thank you, Mr. President. Brazil reiterates its commitment to the right to education and is pleased to co-sponsor the resolution presented by Portugal. The focus given on the potential of safe, reliable, and affordable information and communications technology to enhance learning, personalized education experiences, and expand access to quality instruction is highly welcome. The resolution underscores the importance of adopting appropriate measures to accelerate efforts to bridge digital and technological divides. These divides are rooted in persistent forms of discrimination based on multiple and intersecting factors such as gender, race, disabilities, and poverty, which are further exacerbated in contexts of disasters and armed conflicts. Combating all forms of discrimination within the education system, whether structural or technological, is essential for building a fair and democratic society. The integration of digital and AI-based tools in education must be guided by policies that prioritize equity, universal access, and respect for human rights. Brazil also welcomes the references to the right to freedom of opinion and expression, including the freedom to seek, receive, or impart information, the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion, as well as academic freedoms of staff and students as a key dimension of the right to education. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Spain.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much, President. Spain would like to thank Portugal for its constructive work on the preparation of Draft Resolution L11 on the right to education. Education is the fabric that forms individuals and therefore societies based on values and societies that are respectful of human rights. To educate is to open people's minds to a world of opportunities and to encourage curiosity, thinking, and rigor. To multiply opportunities for individuals and for countries, and through critical thinking to acquire the necessary tools for analyzing the world and changing it. The teacher is as important as the pupil, and when I say teacher, I mean maestro in the most genuine meaning of the term. Magister in Latin meant no more, no less than the greatest, he who teaches. Resolution L11 has a particular emphasis on academic freedom, which is essential for the work of teachers. We would like to recall that UNESCO's recommendation on the status of higher education teaching staff, which was approved in 1997, after 40 years of negotiations, defines academic freedom as the right to teach and debate without any limitations imposed by established doctrines, and the freedom to carry out investigations and to disseminate and publish the results of those research, and freedom to freely express one's own opinion about the system in which one works, and the freedom in the face of institutional censorship, and the freedom to take part in professional bodies or trade unions. We need to continue working to ensure academic freedom and freedom of thought. We must overcome inequalities and ensure that we give effect to the right to quality education, education that is accessible and inclusive for all, and which also takes into account the use of new technologies. As Portugal has just said, this draft resolution condemns the increase in attacks against education in the context of armed conflicts and occupation, as well as the use of schools for military purposes. Spain has signed the Declaration on Safe Schools, and we urge all states to do the same. Allow me to recall that only a few days ago, we heard here in this room that 70% of schools in Gaza have been destroyed. The Gazan girls and boys are not eating, they're not studying, and they cannot look to the future. Let us not be indifferent to these unbearable attacks. Today, more than ever before, we need to reaffirm the right of all to education everywhere. Sir, Spain supports this resolution. We hope that it will be adopted by consensus. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Colombia.
Señor Presidente, la garantía de una...
President, guaranteeing inclusive, equitable, and quality education and promoting learning opportunities throughout one's life for all, as set forth by SDG 4, are goals on which all states should focus and work tirelessly and resolutely. UNESCO and UNICEF, in their global report on early childhood care and education of 2024, found that more than 300 million girls and boys will not achieve basic reading skills by 2030 unless urgent measures are adopted. They also observed that only 57% of preschool teachers in low-income countries are appropriately trained. In addition, at the global level, between 2022 and 2023, attacks against education were regular, generalized, and increasing. And according to the Global Coalition for Protecting Education Against Attacks, the GCPEA, around 6,000 incidents were recorded involving attacks against students, teachers, schools, and universities, as well as schools being used for military purposes. We will soon have the results for 2024-2025, and I'm sure the results will be even worse. Colombia, just like the resolution, firmly condemns any attacks against students, teachers, schools, and educational establishments, and we reaffirm our commitment to the protection of the right to education in armed conflict. In light of our commitment, our country officially signed the Safe School Declaration in 2022, and we have adopted a national action plan on safe schools, the goal of which is to ensure safe learning environments that are free from violence for all of the educational community. Colombia also reaffirms its commitment to early education as the key pillar for ensuring children's comprehensive development and overcoming poverty. We have made the strengthening of comprehensive early childhood care a priority with a territorial, ethnic, and differentiated approach. Colombia, in keeping with the resolution, recognizes the benefits of school meal programs as a key tool for ensuring the right to education, for ensuring school attendance, and the physical and cognitive development of pupils. We would like to thank the delegation of Portugal for having spearheaded this draft resolution, and we invite this August Council to adopt it once again by consensus. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Costa Rica.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, President. Costa Rica would like to thank Portugal for the presentation of this draft resolution and for having effectively led informal consultations in a constructive spirit. Academic freedom and freedom of expression are essential pillars for the protection of human rights and for ensuring the right to education. These freedoms make it possible for both the teaching staff and students to carry out research and to debate and learn. This is absolutely essential for scientific progress and for building knowledge as a common good. In the context of the right to education, we need to respect and promote other human rights that are interrelated, such as freedom of expression and the right to receive, disseminate, and impart information, freedom of thought and conscience, and the freedom of peaceful assembly and association, including the holding of peaceful demonstrations by students and teachers. States, educational institutions, and academic staff have the responsibility of fostering an inclusive, safe, and enabling environment that fosters critical thinking and evidence-based learning. Growing restrictions on academic freedom, including in renowned universities, are a source of deep concern. They are eroding democratic access to knowledge. We are glad that L11, amongst other things, has emphasized that point, and therefore we are glad to once again be a co-sponsor of this text, and we hope that it will be adopted without a vote. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Dominican Republic.
Muchísimas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, President. The Dominican Republic fully supports Resolution L11 on the right to education. We are glad to be a co-sponsor for it, and we'd like to congratulate Portugal, a country with which we share a common vision for defending multilateralism, human dignity, and the central role of economic, social, and cultural rights. This resolution reaffirms that the right to education is essential not just for individual development, but also for building democratic societies that are just and inclusive. We would like to adopt a broad approach that includes key aspects such as inclusive and quality education, equitable access from early childhood up until higher education, the protection of academic freedom, and the need to strengthen public systems. We particularly welcome that this resolution addresses current challenges through specific proposals focused on strengthening international cooperation, sustainable financing, and commitments to the SDGs, especially SDG 4. President, the Dominican Republic has made education a national priority, and we acknowledge the importance of regulatory frameworks and global cooperation for ensuring its universality. Therefore, we welcome initiatives that foster international solidarity and equitable access to knowledge as a tool for social transformation. Therefore, we encourage this Council to adopt this resolution by consensus, ensuring access to education in conflict situations is not just an obligation under international law and international human rights, but it is also a matter of unity and reconstruction. Thank you.
Thank you. I have been informed by the Secretariat that there are no PBIs for this draft proposal. I now give the floor to members of the Council who wish to make explanations of votes before the vote on the draft proposal. I don't see any requests for the floor. Is there a request for a vote? I see none. May I take it that draft proposal L11 may be adopted without a vote? It is so decided. Thank you. The Council will now consider draft proposal L13 entitled Civil Society Space, and I give the floor to the distinguished representatives of Ireland and Sierra Leone to introduce the draft text. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, President. On behalf of the cross-regional core group of Chile, Japan, Sierra Leone, Tunisia, and my own country, Ireland, I'm honoured to present draft resolution L13, Civil Society Space. Civil society is a crucial partner in our collective efforts to protect and promote human rights at the local, national, regional and international levels, including here at the Human Rights Council. This resolution acknowledges their vital contribution, but we must also recognise the alarming rise and growing sophistication of challenges and risks that civil society faces. Threats, intimidation and harassment against civil society actors can have a stifling effect on civil society space and, in some instances, can lead to physical violence and even killings. It is vital that Human Rights Council sends a strong and united message in support of civil society and that Member States take proactive measures to create and maintain a safe and enabling civil society space. States and other stakeholders, including business enterprise, must ensure that their legislation, policies and practices do not hinder the ability of civil society to operate freely and independently. We thank all states and civil society for the active participation and constructive engagement during the negotiation process of this draft resolution and call on states to lend their support. With your permission, President, I'd like to pass the floor now to my colleague from Sierra Leone to complete this introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, President. Sierra Leone echoes the comments made by the erudite Ambassador White of Ireland and extends its sincere gratitude on behalf of the core group to all those who participated in the negotiations of this draft resolution. The core group convened 6 open informal consultations and conducted extensive bilateral outreach with both states and civil society organizations to ensure that a variety of perspectives were reflected in the resolutions. The outcome of these discussions is a comprehensive and balanced text that enjoys cross-regional co-sponsorship of over 50 states. The core group appreciates the support of the co-sponsors of this draft resolution and is pleased to have achieved consensus on this initiative, which is highly relevant to this Council and all states. Civil society space is not just an abstract idea, but a necessary condition for the realization of a just, peaceful, and democratic societies, ensuring the safe, meaningful, diverse, and inclusive participation of civil society in decision-making processes at all levels also empowers communities and contributes to good governance and the rule of law. We therefore call on all states to support this resolution by joining a consensus. And I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I have been informed by the Secretariat that there are 10 additional co-sponsors, and I now give the floor to members of the Council who wish to make general comments. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Cuba.
Thank you, President. We would like to thank Ireland, Chile, Japan, Sierra Leone and Tunisia for the presentation of draft resolution L13. Cuba reiterates its full support for the work of civil society organizations, as well as their positive contribution to regulatory development and social and economic development and decision-making processes. We would like to underscore that you cannot claim to impose unique civil society models that have nothing to do with the local and historic and cultural specificities of each country, nor can this concept be manipulated and used as a pretext for interfering in domestic affairs or undermining the domestic order of sovereign states. As this resolution recognizes, civil society operates within the framework of national law in accordance with the UN Charter and international law. Debates regarding civil society space and civil society itself should not be used as an instrument to impose selective pressure against countries of the global south. This practice runs counter to the principles of objectivity, universality, and impartiality that ought to guide the work of this Council. Fostering a propitious environment for civil society participation needs to be based on genuine cooperation and respect, and not on, it shouldn't happen through the imposition of pressure and mandates. We believe that Cuba has played a key role with civil society in the development of our policies and laws. Civil society's capacity to mobilize makes it a key player in our national context. Cuban NGOs have a strong capacity for proposing solutions and discussion on issues such as gender equality, the fight against racial discrimination, environmental protection, and the protection of the rights of children, older persons, and persons with disabilities. There is ever greater cooperation and coordination between our government bodies and associations that make up civil society, all with a view to achieving greater protection for human rights. Cuba will continue to strengthen participatory mechanisms in decision-making processes in all areas. And in this process, we have legitimate and broad contributions from civil society actors. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Albania.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Albania would like to thank the core group of the draft resolution on civil society space for their outstanding efforts to have a balanced draft resolution which reaffirm the role of civil society in the protection and promotion of human rights. Threats against civil society are on the rise globally and therefore require a global response, including from the Human Rights Council. As a member of Human Rights Council, Albania reaffirms its unwavering commitment to the promotion and protection of the human rights and fundamental freedoms. We recognize that a vibrant, diverse, and independent civil society is essential to the realization of these rights. Civil society plays a vital role in fostering accountability, transparency, and good governance. It contributes meaningfully to the prevention of human rights violation, the promotion of rule of law, and the advancement of inclusive and sustainable development. The draft resolution rightly acknowledges these contributions and calls on states to create and maintain a safe and enabling environment in which civil society can operate freely, both online and offline. Albania strongly supports the call for a follow-up report by the High Commissioner to assess progress and identify emerging challenges to civil society space. We believe this would be a valuable tool for all stakeholders in strengthening civil space globally. We welcome the balanced and inclusive approach taken by the core group during the consultation process. We urge all members of this council to join us in sending a strong and united message that civil society is not only a partner, but a cornerstone of our collective efforts to uphold human rights. Mr. President, Albania supports the consensual adoption of this draft resolution and calls on all delegation to vote against any amendment that would weaken the text. If a vote is called, Albania will vote in favor of the draft resolution. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Colombia.
President, at the global level, civil society space is threatened due to practices such as the excessive use of force and the criminalization of human rights activism. The rights to freedom of assembly and peaceful association continue to suffer from attacks, and some countries continue to restrict civil society space and to suffocate the democratic debate. The right to freedom of peaceful assembly and association is reflected in this resolution, and there is also mention of the concern that digital technologies can be used to persecute and repress political activists, creating a negative effect on democratic participation. States need to reaffirm our commitment to the comprehensive protection of human rights defenders. We must acknowledge their key role in building a democratic society that is fair and inclusive. In the face of existing challenges, Colombia is in favor of strengthening mechanisms for protection, prevention, and justice with a differentiated approach and ensuring a safe and enabling environment for human rights defenders to do their work, both online and offline, so that civil society can work without any obstacles and safely. Civil society participation in decision-making processes is essential for democracy. This participation must be inclusive, diverse, safe, and meaningful. There can be no democracy without free civil society, without a thriving civil society. Civil society cannot thrive without democratic institutions. This draft resolution addresses important elements of these aspects, so we would like to thank the delegations of Ireland, Japan, Sierra Leone, Tunisia, and Chile for having presented this draft resolution, and we look forward to it being adopted by this Council. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Republic of Korea would like to thank the core group for bringing forth this important initiative. Civil society is an essential partner in amplifying the voices of marginalized communities, promoting accountability and advancing peace and development. Civil society actors also play an indispensable role in the protection and promotion of the human rights by providing early warning of deteriorating human rights situations or serious human rights violations. In this regard, we are alarmed by the growing attempts to silence, hinder, or harass civil society actors and human rights defenders, including through strategic lawsuits against public participation and transnational repression. Therefore, we need to reaffirm our commitment to ensuring a safe and enabling environment for civil society, both online and offline. We commend the core group for leading an inclusive and transparent negotiation during the informal consultation. We believe that the outcome is a balanced and strong text that reflects the spirit of compromise and remains focused on the recent challenges faced by civil society actors. Against this backdrop, we lend our strong support to draft resolution L13 and encourage the Council to adopt this important initiative by consensus. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Spain.
Thank you very much, President. I have the honor to speak on behalf of the EU member states that are members of the Human Rights Council. This general comment has been agreed by the EU as a whole. The EU warmly thanks the delegations of Chile, Ireland, Japan, Sierra Leone, and Tunisia for presenting this important initiative on civil society space. Civil society plays an essential role in protecting and promoting human rights and in pursuing accountability for human rights violations and abuses, and contributing to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals at the local, national, regional, and international levels. Unjustified restrictions to their ability to operate freely jeopardize the achievement of these objectives and are a threat to democracy and the rule of law. The EU is a staunch supporter of a vibrant, independent, and diverse civil society, and in a global context of shrinking civil society space, the EU acknowledges the timeliness of this resolution. It is important for this Council to send a united message in support of civil society and its work. Sir, we welcome the core group's constructive and transparent approach throughout the negotiations to reflect the concerns and views raised by different member states and civil society, including through 6 open informal consultations and numerous bilateral discussions. These discussions have contributed to a balanced text that emphasizes the essential role of civil society, underscores some of the key challenges they face, and calls on states to create and maintain a safe and enabling environment for their work. The EU therefore supports Resolution L13 and joins consensus. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Dominican Republic.
Gracias.
Thank you, President. The Dominican Republic would like to thank Chile, Japan, Sierra Leone, and Tunisia for the presentation of Resolution L13 on civil society spaces. This draft reaffirms a fundamental principle for our democracies: the need of ensuring a safe environment, both online and offline, so that civil society organizations can operate unhindered and without fear of reprisals. The resolution firmly recognizes the vital role played by civil society in protecting and promoting human rights, in conflict prevention, and accountability. The Dominican Republic fully agrees with this approach. Therefore, we have, in fact, developed a national strategy for civil society space that is based on 5 pillars: ensuring an enabling environment for civil society organizations, promoting meaningful citizen participation, protecting civic liberties and human rights, ensuring access to information and combating disinformation, and fostering a strengthened digital civil society space. According to the VDEM 2024 index, the Dominican Republic ranks 4th in Latin America as regards the level of civic openness. However, we do acknowledge that challenges remain at the global level for ensuring a more impactful, inclusive, and representative citizen participation. In this spirit and reaffirming our commitment to a human-centered form of multilateralism, we encourage all member states to adopt this resolution by consensus. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Marshall Islands.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Republic of the Marshall Islands would like to thank the core group for presenting draft resolution entitled Civil Society Space. And as a co-sponsor of this resolution, the Marshall Islands is pleased to voice its support for this draft, and we remain committed to the promotion and protection of safe, inclusive, and enabling environments both offline and online for civil society. The Marshall Islands recognize the importance of civil society in the protection and promotion of human rights, strengthening democracy and sustainable development. As a low-lying island nation, the Marshall Islands stands at the forefront of the climate crisis, which threatens not just our land, but our way of life. In these moments of difficulty, we rely on each other, and our community and civil society are at the heart of our resilience. Through civil society, global advocacy, and grassroots initiatives, we are not passive victims, but agents of change. This resolution strengthens existing civil society initiatives with a focus on the changing digital dimensions of civil space. In an era of rising transnational repression and digital surveillance, this draft resolution provides an important step in developing a cohesive framework for states to act in the defense of human rights defenders, grassroots organizations, and civil society advocates. Ultimately, this resolution aligns with values that guide democratic governance, transparency, accountability, and rights protection. And we believe it sends a clear message. Civil society is essential for the promotion and protection of human rights, and that all states have a responsibility in defending civil space. We therefore call on member states to stand with us in support of this text. Doing so would reaffirm our collective commitment to strengthen the voices of those working to create freer and fairer societies. Mr. President, we join the core group in urging fellow council members to adopt this resolution by consensus. Kamol-Dada, and I thank you.
Thank you. I have been informed by the Secretariat that there are program budgetary implications for this draft proposal. The PBIs amount to a total of $80,000. This amount will need to be added to the budget. I now give the floor to members of the Council who wish to make explanations of votes before the vote on the draft. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of China.
Mr. President, China attaches importance to the positive role played by civil society at the national, regional, and international levels in promoting and protecting human rights and in fostering economic and social development. We support civil society in conducting its work in an orderly manner in accordance with the law and in playing a positive and constructive role. China participated in the consultation on L13 in a constructive and cooperative manner and join other countries in proposing constructive amendments. We welcome the core group for having taken on board the elements such as the threats and attacks faced by civil society organizations in occupied territories. At the same time, the text contains issues of common concern to many countries. First, it overemphasizes on the rights and freedom of civil society and does not adequately address the obligation of civil society in its operation, including ensuring that it's participating in the activities of the UN is in conformity with the purpose and the principles of the UN Charter. Second, it exclusively calls on governments to remove legal restrictions on the work of civil society without explicitly indicating that it should operate in the legal framework of a country. In view of the imbalance of the text of the draft resolution, China will not join the consensus of the draft. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. No other requests for the floor. Is there a request for a vote? I see none. May I take it that draft proposal L13 may be adopted without a vote? It is so decided. Thank you very much. The Council will now consider draft proposal L14, new and emerging digital technologies and human rights. We may go a few minutes over lunch break for those of you who made arrangements, and I thank the interpreters for their flexibilities. And I give the floor to the representative of the Republic of Korea to introduce the draft text.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the core group consisting of Austria, Brazil, Denmark, Morocco, Singapore, and my own country, the Republic of Korea, my delegation has the honor to introduce draft resolution L14, entitled New and Emerging Technologies, UN Emerging Digital Technologies and Human Rights. First adopted in 2019, this resolution is the first Human Rights Council resolution to address the human rights implications of new and emerging digital technologies in a holistic, inclusive, and comprehensive manner. This year, we seek to address the identified gaps and challenges in advancing this agenda within the Council. As the impact of new and emerging digital technologies continue to expand in many aspects of human rights, a wide range of approaches and dialogues are taking place within and outside the human rights system. However, gaps and challenges such as the lack of coordination and coherence, overlaps and contradictions, insufficient implementation still remain. To this end, the resolution calls for a set of actions that could address above issues and achieve meaningful progress. Coordination and coherence can be enhanced, and duplication of efforts can be reduced by convening regular meetings among the human rights mechanisms and relevant UN entities working on digital technology. An analytical study building on the previous mapping report will clarify state obligations and the human rights responsibilities of business enterprises across the life cycle of technologies. Finally, a multi-stakeholder meeting will provide a space where state business enterprises and academics, civil society, and others can get together and share their good practices and challenges and discuss further steps to improve the implementation. The resolution also incorporates references of other international dialogues that are highly related to this agenda, such as the Global Digital Compact. We believe aforementioned mandates will not only meaningfully advance the agenda within the Council, but also work complementary with other international dialogue, thereby breaking this dialogue. Mr. President, in the process of preparing this resolution, the core group conducted 4 rounds of open-ended informal consultations. We have made every effort to ensure an inclusive negotiation process and have taken into careful consideration the valuable inputs received from a wide range of delegations. We express our deep appreciation to all delegations for their constructive participation and engagement during the consultations. We also would like to thank all the co-sponsors for their strong support and we hope that this draft resolution can be adopted once again by consensus. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I have been informed by the Secretariat that there are 21 additional co-sponsors. And I now give the floor to members of the Council who wish to make general comments. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Japan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Japan appreciates the efforts of the core group for this resolution. Japan has taken a proactive and strategic approach to implementing new and emerging digital technologies, including artificial intelligence, based on a progressive
en los procesos de la Cumbre Mundial sobre la Sociedad de la Información clave para asegurar un entorno digital
to guarantee a free, safe, and interoperable digital world. The text also acknowledges the differentiated impacts and risks faced by women and girls and the urgent need to adopt challenges in the face of gender-based violence which are expedited by technology. This approach is fully in line with the feminist foreign policy of Chile. Also, we acknowledge the fact that the text includes guiding principles of business and human rights, which establishes states' obligation to protect the responsibility of companies to allow persons to have access to effective remedies. Companies play a key role in designing and ensuring the implementation of human rights in the digital sphere. So, technologies are not neutral. They have a profound impact on our lives. Digital governance consists of states and societies deciding how we want these technologies to affect us. This draft resolution is very clear-cut in setting out technological developments and ensuring that it places people at the core. That is why Chile firmly supports its adoption by consensus. I thank you.
Thank you. I'll give the floor to the distinguished representative of Czechia.
Mr. President, the Czech Republic would like to thank the core group led by the Republic of Korea for the professional and transparent work on the resolution on new and emerging digital technologies and human rights. The Czech Republic promotes a human rights-based, human-centric digital transformation of the whole life cycle of a new and emerging technologies, including artificial intelligence systems. In this context, we welcome the specific mention of the human rights-based approach, at least in the preamble paragraphs. As you know, we have been strong advocates in favor of a multi-stakeholder approach to digital and technological governance, recognizing the shared responsibility among governments, private sector, academia, international organizations, and civil society. We therefore appreciate the inclusion of the agreed language from the Czech-led consensual Juncker resolution on promotion and protection of human rights in the context of digital technologies. This language reiterates a call on various stakeholders to refrain from the use of artificial intelligence applications that are impossible to operate in compliance with international rights law. Colleagues, this resolution reminds us about what we collectively strive for in this digital age, to ensure that the individual users can safely benefit from digital technologies and at the same time are protected from violations, abuses, and discrimination. Therefore, we commend the references to the implementation of the Global Digital Compact. Mr. President, we are facing budgetary restrictions and efficiency measures. Despite this, and despite numerous asks formulated by the core group, we do welcome the practical operative paragraphs in the resolution. We appreciate the focus on avoiding fragmentation, promoting synergies and coordination among the UN human rights mechanisms and institutions working on digital technologies. We know from our own experience how difficult it is to break silos between Human Rights Council and the technical UN organizations. Thus, we agree that a convening and coordinating role of the Office of the High Commissioner would be highly appropriate to reap the bright benefits. To conclude, we congratulate you once more on a seamless work on this technically challenging topic. We hope the core group will remain engaged and will wisely guide us through further technological deliberations in the future. The Czech Republic co-sponsored this resolution and hopes it can be approved by consensus. Thank you.
Thank you. I have been informed by the Secretariat that there are program budget implications for this draft proposal. The PBI amounts to a total of $107,200. This amount will need to be added to the budget. I now give the floor to members of the Council who wish to make explanations of votes before the vote on the draft proposal, and I give the floor to the distinguished representative of China.
Mr. President, China attaches great importance to the question of new and emerging digital technologies and human rights. We have taken part actively on the several rounds of consultations on L14 and proposed some constructive amendments. We thank the co-sponsors for engaging broadly with all delegations and for accepting parts of China's proposal. Still, we'd like to make two comments on this. Firstly, as it stands now, operative paragraph 8 of the text on intersectional meeting does not explicitly reflect the principle of the IB package on the participation of the NGOs. Secondly, the draft resolution should avoid including non-consensual language so as not to impact negatively on international cooperation in this field. In spite of this, because of the great importance we attach to this question, we'd like to overcome the difficulties and join the consensus on this draft resolution. We will remain engaged and cooperate with all delegations in this field in the interest of quality development of new and emerging digital technologies and the interest of promotion and protection of human rights. I thank you.
Thank you. Any other requests for the floor? Is there a request for a vote? I don't see any. May I take it that draft proposal L14 may be adopted without a vote? It is so decided. Thank you. Excellences, distingués collègues, on était
Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, we were a little bit pessimistic in our calculations, but in any event, I'd like to thank the interpreters for their availability and willingness. This brings us to the end of this meeting, and we'll meet again this afternoon at 3 p.m. to continue the consideration of the draft resolutions and decisions. This meeting is now adjourned. This is the 59th session of the Human Rights Council. I thank you. Thank you and have a good lunch.